my news review. I'm going to talk about 4 articles here. And before I do it, I'd just let you know this is for review, informational, and educational purposes. It's not to take the credit for the articles. Credit for each article goes to the publisher and the person who wears this story by, such as the author. Okay? In this case, the full credit goes to the Associated Press or the AP. The story by Deepa Half, if I pronounced it correctly. Now the headline: Vivek Ramaswamy's Hindu faith is front and center in his GOP presidential campaign. So, for people that care about, that's what it is. Vivek Ramaswamy speaks at the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, 2023, February-March 3, 2023, at National Harbor in Oxon Hill, Maryland. Ramaswamy, the 37-year-old biotech entrepreneur, is hovering among the top contenders as Republican president candidate, while being open about his Hindu faith. Okay, well, we have some pictures here. And again, all these pictures are full credit goes to the publisher, Associated Press, and or the author, depending on who has the rights to the photos, etc. Okay. So, having said that, after I do this review, and again the emphasis on review, and it's put out to educate the people, inform the people, so it is for information and educational purposes. In the comments section, you're welcome to weigh in on this article and the 4 articles in it. Now to the article. Vivek Ramaswamy is comfortable about talking about Bible stories as he is sharing the messages as the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most sacred Hindu texts. The 37-year-old biotech entrepreneur turned Republican presidential candidate has been steadily garnering support in a party dominated by conservative Christians. In many polls, he is 3rd place behind former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And he is one of the 6 candidates who have qualified for the first GOP presidential debate on August 23rd. I'm definitely going to be doing reviews on that. It's going to be huge. So I'm going to be watching that. I'm going to be giving reviews. And hopefully a play-by-play on that too. With giving full credit to the news agency who has provided that. It's only as fair use, as I've mentioned before. That is it's only just for review, information, and educational purposes. Obviously, it's not to take credit saying I'm the one who produced the video or the broadcast. It's just to comment on, to make a review, to have my opinion, and at the same time inform people and educate people on what's happening, which is fair. It's basically what people do when they review things, like if you review a movie, you review a book. By the way, I'm going to be doing a review on some movies. I haven't done that. I'm going to be doing some reviews on movies, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be huge. I will be doing a review. Okay. Stay tuned. I want to give you guys the most up-to-date, interesting stuff that you most likely would care about. So anyway, yes, so that caption was provided by the Associated Press. Him speaking. And the second one looks like a pulpit. That's religion election 2024 Swami Hindu candidate, provided by the Associated Press as well. Now, United States people do have freedom of speech. People have the right to express their opinion as long as it's not threatening or it's not like something that incites violence. I don't know if it's hate speech where that stands, but basically, if you're just objectively telling the truth and or telling your opinion about something in a peaceful way, it's not inciting violence or not threatening or harassing anybody, should be okay. Especially if it's just a matter of fact, just what it is. Anyway, I need some water here. Always gotta get refilled with water, so the throat hydrated. Anyway, yes. Anyway, as the article stated, Ramsani shared 10 core beliefs as part of his campaign, with, quote, God is real, unquote, topping the list, followed by, quote, there are two genders, unquote. He cascaded into the limelight with his 2021 book, Woke Incorporated, unquote. That's the name of his book. Inside Corporate America's Social Justice Scam, quote, a scathing critique of corporations that he says use social justice causes as a smokescreen for self-interest policies. Well, that's a good point. I don't want to influence you on my opinion as it relates to what's going on. Just whatever said, if I agree, disagree, I'll tell you why. But ultimately, it's just to share my opinion. It's not to influence you. And the idea is when I'm giving this review, it's getting you to think about what the truth is. Right? Now, he became a regular commentator on Fox News and other conservative outlets, backing capitalism and meritocracy, and criticizing affirmative action, mask mandates, and open borders. And it's very interesting from a matter of fact point of view. The mask mandates thing was huge in 2020. And then 2022, they kind of forgot about it. It's like wearing masks, they forgot about it. But it was such a huge thing between 2020 and the beginning of 2022. I can tell you for sure that's true. Because I remember that working at my job, it's like, oh yes, you have to wear a mask. Okay. You have to social distance 6 feet. Okay. That makes sense. That's definitely the social distancing makes sense. Wearing a mask also to a certain extent. At that time, I thought made sense. So it's also interesting how affirmative action has become repealed. I believe, yes, Supreme Court, I believe, did rule that affirmative action is unconstitutional. So open borders thing is something I won't comment on. For some reason, which I don't know why, a lot of people are very passionate about that. But the thing is, in my view, every country needs to have law and order, and they need to protect their borders. So, however the country believes that that's how they should do it, is probably how they're going to do it. That said, let's continue. He is anti-abortion and believes gender dysphoria should be treated as a mental illness. He has expressed support for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, uh, whose populist policies have been divisive. Well, here's the thing about divisive policies: you're not going to be able to satisfy everybody. And the stronger your opinion is, the more polarizing you are, the more divisive you are. And the problem is that if you don't stand for something, you're going to have both people. Versus if you have one that really, so it's kind of like if you have one that really likes you, the other one hates you that much, inversely more, or can, in accordance to that much, as in commensurate to that much. So you can't really help that. There's always going to be people with different opinions, different feelings on the matter, whether it's factually based or just visceral. That's just not what it is. Religion election 2024 rests on the Hindu candidate provided by the Associated Press. Here as the caption, as I did want to give credit to the publisher for the picture. Now, on the campaign trail, Ramaswamy leaned into a space as vice for the nomination of a party where evangelical Christian support is key. In speeches and casual conversations with these voters, he maintains that his religion has much in common with the Judeo-Christian values that this nation was quote, founded on. Quote, the Judeo-Christian values this nation was founded on. I'm not sure why they call it Judeo-Christian, but that's what they call it. So certain things I won't comment on, just except for I'm not sure why they call it that. See a picture here. Republican president candidate and businessman Vivek Ramaswamy speaks at Moms for Liberty meetings in Philadelphia Saturday, July 1. 2023, he maintains that his religion has much in common with the Judeo-Christian values this nation was on. Well, that will be for people. Uh, Factually, I don't think that's a factual. I don't think that can be factually backed up. But you are free to have your own opinion. He says, "I'm an ardent defender of the religious liberty," he said in an interview with the Associated Press. "I'll be even more vocal and unapologetic defender of it precisely because no one is going to accuse me of being a Christian nationalist." Well, no accuse of anything, really. From what I've seen over the years, people accuse things of just things that don't make sense. For example, one guy is Jewish. Who was the guy? There was one guy that was accused of being a Nazi or something weird. And he's just the opposite, but they're accusing of him. It's like, I forgot his name, but the guy's like a famous Jewish guy. You know, like, accusing him of being a Nazi or something related to Nazism. It's like, how does that work? So people will just come up with things like, for example, you're hot, and they'll say, "Oh no, you're actually cold." It's kind of like north is south and south is north. And it's just like, people just come up with stuff because they don't have anything else legitimate. It's kind of like if you debunked an argument, but then they use personal attacks as their only last ditch thing, which a person who recognizes it will say either won't give it credence or will just laugh at it because it doesn't make any sense. And I don't believe in giving it any credence. As in, why argue with somebody who has a bad argument? I will just laugh at it. So, um, anyway, that's basically what it is. By the way, whatever ads you see on the side, that has nothing to do with me. In fact, sometimes I want to, like, what was that thing? They come up with their most random things. Anyway, um, yeah. So while questions have been raised about his ability to appeal to conservative Christian voters, Usami said he has more in common with people of all faiths than those with no faith at all. Well, that's sort of, you see what it is. It's basically like the extremes. Yeah, hot, like lukewarm has more in common with hot. Lukewarm has to do with frozen. It's like he has some things in common, but depends from what perspective. Like religiously, no. But socially, politically, yes. So it depends from what point of view we're talking about. And he says, quote, "I was raised in a belief system where there's only one true God who empowers each of us with our own capacities," he said. "As we say in the Hindu tradition, God resides in each one of us. In the Christian tradition, you say you're all made in the image of God." Well, the child of immigrants from southern India, Sami grew up in Cincinnati speaking Tamil at home, and his religious parents who performed pujas, which is a form of worship ritual. He heard stories from Hindu epics, offered daily prayers to deities, and attended temples in Dayton and Cincinnati. He and his wife, Apurva, a physician, planned to raise their two sons as Hindus. Rasamani said he was also deeply influenced by Christians. He cemented his anti-abortion stance while attending Saint Xavier Catholic High School in Cincinnati. He learned a strong, quote, Protestant's work ethic, unquote. He was a piano teacher of 10 years. Quote, "The lesson learned from being Hindu was similar in many overlapping ways with the Judeo-Christian values like sacrifice, performing your duty without attachment to the results, and believing that your work on earth is not being done by you, but through you, he said. Adding these Hindu values seem to resonate with Christian and Jewish audiences. You notice how he didn't say Judeo-Christian audiences. He said Christian and Jewish audiences. And here we have a picture. Vivek Ramaswamy speaks at the National Rifle Association convention in Indianapolis Friday, April 14, 2023. And of course, the credit goes to AP Photo and Michael Conroy. We also have sent other photos too, which just saw those. Not all feedback from Christians have been favorable. Hank Kudeman, a pro-Trump pastor in Nebraska, attacked Ramsey's faith during a recent sermon. And you see here, you see this guy speaking. Picture. It says Vivek Ramaswamy speaks at a conservative political action conference, CPAC 2023, Friday, March 3 at National Harbor in Oxon Hill, Maryland. Credit goes to AP and Alex Brandon for this one. Then he says, "What are we doing?" He asks his congregation, quote, "You're going to have some dude put his hand on something other than the Bible? You're going to let him put all of his strange gods up in the White House?" Well, if you're a Christian and you're a real Christian, in other words, as in you actually believe what you say you believe, not just somebody who calls, because other people can call themselves whatever religion, but you actually follow it. And we have a photo here of Republican president candidate Vivek Ramaswamy speaks outside a shuttered former South Shore high school where the city of Chicago is planning to house illegal immigrants. That is of Friday, May 19, 2023 in Chicago. Credit to the AP and photo by Paul Beatty. Ramaswamy dismissed Kuninen's views as unrepresentative of most U.S. Christians. Well, that's what he says. He doesn't speak for everybody. He thinks he does, but he doesn't. Everybody has their own voice. Everybody can decide on their own. But when it comes to religion, if you really follow religion, there are certain characteristics that make up whatever religion. And I can understand what the pastor's saying. So that's the thing is coffee, for example, if we say coffee is coffee, but there's different types of coffee, so we need to be specific on what we're specifically referring to. But suffice to say that Hinduism is not compatible with Christianity. So you'll find you'll find some characteristics that are similar in a lot of religions, but doesn't mean they're so similar. It just means, okay, this is similar, this one shares this belief, but doesn't mean it's the same belief. And just saying sort of matter of factly. Anyway, well, the first reaction to such speech is one of frustration. The truth is, I'm running to lead a nation, including those who disagree with me. He says. His approach is drawing support from influential Christian leaders, including Bob Vander Plates, who has a front row seat for Ramaswamy's open campaign visit to Iowa. He says Ramaswamy's common sense values and shared are other reasons for him being, quote, very warmly received by audiences of faith. While Ramaswamy's faith may not be ideal for Christian voters, it comes down to making the best choice available. Since Vander Plates, president of a conservative group, the family leader, he said, if we were to make a candidate, it would be someone who shares a faith, he said. Well, but I'd much rather see him as president than Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, or Kamala Harris, however it's or Gavin Newsom. Yeah, that's the way it's always been, seems like in American politics. I'll come short to actually, or fall short to actually say completely my opinion on that. Most Hindu Americans and Indian Americans, on the other hand, tend to vote Democratic and be progressive on social issues like abortion, immigration, and LGBT LGBTQ rights. They are divided over Ramaswamy's candidacy. Some are particularly irked by his eagerness to equate Hindu and Christian teachings. But he is taking great care to show a certain aspect of Hinduism without talking about mysticism and polytheism, which are core aspects of religion, says Karthik Ramakrishnan, founder of AAPI, data and a public policy professor at University of California, Riverside. And you can see he's pictured here. This bus is a campaign with Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy steps off this bus after arriving at a campaign rally Thursday, May 11, 2023 in Urbandale, Iowa. And of course, the full credit goes to the Associated Press. As usual. Tells Ramaswamy is, quote, feeding a certain need in the Republican Party, unquote, and getting attention because he is a novelty in ways that Andrew Yang was for Democrats in 2020. Ramakrishnan said he is among those candidates who may not have all expected attributes or the experience, but through the power of their ideas are able to get into the conversation. Ria Chakrabarti, policy director of Hindus for Human Rights, said she is concerned for Ramaswamy's attempt to, quote, package Hinduism in the family values world, talking about it is as a monotheistic religion to appeal to the Abrahamic faith. So obviously not everybody agrees. That's what I'm saying is I also have that concern too because as a matter of fact it's not the same kind of religion. Hinduism is not a monotheistic religion for sure. Versus of course Christianity. I'm just speaking facts, that's all. From a Hindu perspective, every person has a fundamental right to make a choice about how they want to access healthcare, she said. Ramaswamy, referring to Ramaswamy, saying unborn life is life. What does that mean policy-wise? It is also worrying to see Hindu life into LGBTQ8 because Hinduism is a rich history when it comes to queerness. I don't think I'm going to quote on. I don't think I'm going to comment on that one. For other Hindu Americans who may disagree with Ramaswamy's views, his candidacy still presented an important shift in American politics. He said, "I don't share." This person said, "I don't share his politics by a mile," said Sumit Ganguly, a political science professor at Indiana University. Quote, but he is gutsy for not hiding his faith or converting Christianity for political gain. This might not have been possible 10 years ago. Well, I'll let you weigh in on that one, where it says, converting to Christianity for political gain. And in fact, if in fact that is true, I won't comment on that. Christianity still has a steep hill to climb because most Americans know little about Hinduism, he said. Suhag Shukla is executive director of the Hindu American Foundation, said that when Hindu Americans run for any office, quote, it's inspirational for kids to know that they can be who they are and proud of their heritage and values. Ramaswamy's candidate also affects the growing political diversity within the Hindu community, Shukla said. For Republican voters, Vandir Plates said Ramaswamy continued success hinges on distinguishing himself from GOP frontrunners. He compared Ramaswamy to Queen Esther in the Bible, who was chosen by God to save the Jewish people from genocide. Quote, he needs to show us why this is Esther's moment. Well, it says here, Associated Press religion coverage receives support through AP's collaboration with the Conservation U.S. funding from Lilly Endowment Incorporated The EPA is solely responsible for its content. So I will skip the rest of these articles on this page. I will give you a link to this article once I have finished this and I've uploaded it. Okay. You'll be able to see this article and read for yourself. Let's move on to the second article. And I do want to reiterate before I start the second article, this is for review, education, and information purposes. Full credit goes to the Washington Examiner and the author, which is Christopher, is a patent technology reporter. Okay, just so you know that. It's a semiconductor. This is Biden's semiconductor war with China slowly revealing cracks in the industry. You can see there's a picture from Russell State Office. Now there's a video, so when I give you the link, you'll be able to watch it in its entirety. Let's get to the article here. The White House trade war with China over semiconductor chip manufacturing has begun to take a toll on companies worldwide as they navigate the growing web of industry restrictions. Over the past year, the United States has implemented controls and licensing requirements related to the sale of advanced chips and chip components to China. China reciprocated kind limited who can buy the necessary components for chip manufacturing. The escalated restrictions have been justified by the Biden administration on national security grounds. They may be costing U.S. companies. Okay. Well, here's the thing: they're both gonna lose, but the thing is, it depends on who needs the chip more. Now, what there are creative solutions that are available. It's only a question of whether they're willing to implement them. In terms of losing business on the US side. Okay, here we go. Donald Trump indicted on all things you need to know before reigning at DC courthouse. That's kind of like the second sub-article. Some of the most innovative and cutting-edge American companies, particularly in the chip space, are those kind of fabulous guys like NVIDIA and others without a lot of money in China. Scott Linicol, Professor of Economics at the Cato Institute told the Washington Examiner, quote, and we might not like it as foreign policy matter, but hurting some of the most innovative American companies is not a great thing when you're trying to win a tech war. Yeah, just thinking about that previous article there. Yeah, so innovation is the key because the thing is, it's like kind of like the smart kid who has all the answers in school. It's easy when you're given the answers, but it's not easy to get the answer. See what I mean? Now, Nvidia is one of the largest semiconductor manufacturers in the world. Has had to adjust the business plan specifically to keep selling in China. Chipmaker initially predicted in August 2022 that it would lose $400 million in sales due to U.S. regulations. The company quickly adapted its products to keep up sales. Nvidia adapted several of its processors in March, but they are well below the criteria listed by the Commerce Department's restriction to be allowed in China, only for U.S. officials to order the companies to stop selling in China altogether. Well, basically, uh, countries have to do what's in their best interests, and the people need to speak and decide if that's really what they should be doing going forward. Now, Nvidia was not the only affected company. U.S.-based manufacturer Micron estimated that China's May ban on the company over national security concerns would cost it a high single-digit percentage of its annual revenue. But here's the thing about business: is that Some of the companies in China need the chips to build certain things. So if there's enough, there's actually more of an economic loss for the people who need components to build things than there is people who have chips, because you can always find other companies that want chips. Or you can always use chips for other things as well. That's what I mean about being creative. American companies are not only one to feel the pressure. Chinese-based company Yangtze Memory Technologies Company, which has placed on the U.S. list of restricted company, has had to quote lay off about 10% of its workers after U.S. sanctions and slashed more than half of its orders for production tools as well. Okay, so that's what I'm referring to. You see, it also hurts them, but you see, those companies will not go bankrupt, but the people who need the chips eventually will go bankrupt if they can't get the chips. See the difference? Chinese companies have felt that the brunt of the trade war they're getting the brunt of the trade war. Whoever's the brunt is getting the worst end of it. See what I'm saying? As they attempt to rebuild their own ability to manufacture chips internally, the government stepped to stepped in to provide financial support to Chinese chip manufacturers as they tried to replace their plants. The companies also the companies have also had to find alternative tools to build more advanced chips due to the U.S. not allowing Chinese companies to buy the appropriate tools, slowing down production in the process. The trouble for the tech sector began with President Joe Biden and the Commerce Secretary Sina Raimondo decided to limit Chinese innovation through the series of tariffs and export controls over parts required to develop advanced technology. The Commerce Department implemented rules in October 2022 that placed dozens of Chinese companies on quote unverified list, which limited their ability to acquire semiconductors of advanced technology from the U.S. without a license. So basically, you have to have a license, but the difficulty is how do you get the license? The quote unverified list expanded over this year, with the Commerce Department adding dozens of additional companies to the list of Chinese firms now affected. This included placing companies like Yangtze on the list. The Commerce Department is expected to implement additional restrictions in August, including an executive order from Biden himself. U.S. pressure on China has escalated the implementation of a major infrastructure bill called the CHIPS, as an acronym, CHIPS, otherwise known as CHIPS Act, which Biden has signed last August, provided $52 billion in subsidies to encourage the development of domestic chip makers and suppliers. The law has also offered incentives to U.S. companies to stop operating in China, including limits on how many subsidies a company can receive based on their investment in China. China attempted to turn the pressure on the U.S. The Eastern Superpower implemented restrictions on gallium and germanium, two metals necessary for creating high-level chips, in early July over alleged national security concerns. See, the country has also banned the use of chips from. Here's the things: when you need chips from a country, doesn't matter what country, and then you say, okay, no, you're not allowed to buy them. It's hurting you more than it's hurting them. Second of all, those materials will be found from someone else. So the problem is, as the article was saying, they're taking the brunt of it, meaning they're getting hit more by it. See, the real challenge is innovating, because if you can innovate, you can find ways of doing things. But as I've said this for years and years: is innovation and first coming up with the idea, and then finally the technology, and then finally implementation. That part, as it relates to innovation, that's the hardest part. See, is the technology itself, and also coming from a culture that's very much a culture that is very homogenous, and a culture that requires everybody comply with what society says. See what I'm saying? Conformative culture. We're not the only culture in the world that's like that. I'm just saying, as it relates to this article, that's what it is. So, in the comments after I've, of course, uploaded this video, I welcome you to um, make a weigh in with your idea. Just as the first video I was referring to earlier, you're welcome to give your opinion about this and also why. Just make sure it's in a constructive conversation, not threatening and not derogatory. Okay? The point is we're trying to facilitate a constructive dialogue, not a deconstructive dialogue. Okay? Right? Now let's go to the third article. And before I talk about the third article, I know I'm being repetitive. This is important just for disclaimer purposes. The purpose of this review is for review, informational purposes, which means to get the information out to people, and educational purposes for people to understand what's happening in the world. It's not to take credit for the actual article itself. The credit for the article itself goes to the publisher, in this case, which is the Associated Press, and the author, which is a story by Tom Krischer, which is the AP author right here. With that out of the way, let me read the headline. EPA's ambitious plan to cut auto emissions to slow climate change runs into skepticism. So I will tell you that there's been attempts for this. So, by classification, the first one was global warming. Okay? Before global warming was ozone. I remember them talking about the ozone layer forever. But the problem is that they found that the ozone layer no longer has a hole in it. So either it had something brilliant that healed it, or there was no such thing. And then the second thing that was mentioned in the 2000s was the global warming. Well, they no longer call it global warming for whatever reason. I'm not exactly sure what the official reason is. They don't call it that anymore. The newest expression now is climate change. Climate change is a very broad statement or categorization. Could be getting hotter, could be colder. Anything is changed. The climate is changing. Well, how is it changing? Is it getting hotter or colder? Well, that's a question that you can figure out on your own and have your own perspective. I won't try to influence you on that, as that is not the purpose of not only that media should be doing, but also for the purpose of this review, just to make that clear. Now, when we look at the photo here, we see that traffic moves along the 110 freeway in Los Angeles Tuesday, November 22, 2022. The auto industry boosts electric vehicle sales to the level the Environmental Protection Agency recommends. Any reduction in pollution would prove most modest than the agency expects. The Associated Press has estimated that nearly 80% of vehicles being driven in the U.S., more than 200 million, would still run on gasoline and diesel fuel. This is the AP photo. It's like credit going to J.C. Hong, okay, which I guess is, I don't know if he's the photographer or what, but that's the credit for the photo. Now, there's some other photos too. This one also refers to a 2023 Challenger SRT Demon 170 races on a drag strip. An event to unveil the car Monday, March 20, 2023 in Las Vegas. If the auto industry boosts electric vehicle sales to the level the Environmental Protection Agency recommends, any reduction in pollution could prove more modest than the agency expects, just as I said before. Third photo, by the way, credit goes to AP, which is Associated Press, and the photo is by John Watcher. And for the third one, this is a photo of a 2023 Cooper SE hardtop. It's charged outside of Mini dealership Thursday, April 2023 in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. U.S. government's most ambitious plan ever to slash planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicles faces skepticism. Sorry, tongue twisted. skepticism, both from how realistic it is and whether it goes far enough. And the photo is by David Zabolski, right, and also by the AP. It's credit for that, as usual. Also, we have the fourth photo, which is a 2023 R1T pickup truck is charged at a Rivian delivery and service center Wednesday, February 8, 2023 in Denver. U.S. government's most ambitious plan ever to slash planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicles face skepticism from both about how realistic it is and whether it goes far enough. Of course, that's credit for the goes to AP, which is the publisher, and the photo goes to David Zabolski as well. The fourth photo, a Tesla electric vehicle is being charged on Wednesday, May 10, 2023 at Westlake, California. U.S. government's most ambitious plan ever to slash planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions from passenger vehicles faces skepticism both about how realistic it is and whether it goes far enough. Again, the credit goes to AP, and the photos by Mark J. Carroll. And for the fifth photo, we have motorists stop for fuel at gas stations in Detroit, Wednesday, July 5, 2022. The auto industry boosts electric vehicle sales at the level the Environmental Protection Agency recommends. Any reduction in pollution would prove more modest than the agency expects. The Associated Press has estimated that nearly 80% of the vehicles being driven in the U.S., more than 200 million, will still run on gasoline or diesel fuel. According to AP, so the credit goes to AP, and the credit goes to Paul Sansai. And back to the main article. Detroit, AP. U.S. government's most ambitious plan ever to slash planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions from the passenger vehicles faces skepticism about how realistic it is and whether it goes far enough. The Environmental Protection Agency in April announced its new strict emissions limits that the agency are vital to slowing climate change as people around the globe endure record high temperatures, raging wildfires, and intense storms. Now that may or may not relate to the point here, but yeah, this is the picture that I showed you earlier. AP says the industry could meet the limits of 67% of new vehicle sales are electric by 2032, a pace that the auto industry calls unrealistic. However, the new rule would not require automakers to boost electric vehicle sales directly. Instead, it sets emission limits and allows automakers to choose how to meet them. Even if the industry boosts EV sales to the level that the EPA recommends, any reduction in pollution could prove more modest than the agency expects. The Associated Press has estimated nearly 80% of vehicles being driven in the U.S., more than 200 million, run on gasoline or diesel fuel. I think one of the concerns why people don't want EV cars is because it takes too long to charge. The car ends up being more costly than a gas-powered car, and the range on a full tank of gas a lot of times is not comparable in terms of it being less than that of a gasoline-powered car. An environmental group says it's not enough, pointing to surging temperatures and smoke from California wildfires that fouled the air over parts of the U.S. this summer. Dan Becker, director of the Safe Climate Transport Campaign at the Center for Biological Diversity, said, quote, "We need to do a hell of a lot more," unquote. I will only give my opinion, and well, I will say as a matter of fact that the wildfires didn't have no direct relation to this because this has been happening before. It's typical for this area because you have to consider Southern California is built on a desert, really, just like Nevada is, New Mexico is, even Utah is. So that has other issues. Matter of fact, it's oversimplification and not quite accurate because Some of the fire forest fires are caused because of the fact that you have uncleared brush in there, like dead wood that's just not cleared. The other ones are caused by, and of course, some of it is caused by, for example, a lightning striking. Another thing is caused by careless people who set fire to something. So it's not quite as simple as they're saying, at least from my point of view. But you can disagree with me if you like. What I recommend you do is to do your research, track the news, track what's going on locally with people, look at the facts of the situation. He wants the EPA to slash emissions even further. Carbon dioxide and methane levels in the atmosphere keep rising, scientists say. July will end up being the hottest month on record, and likely the warmest human civilization has seen. The Earth is only a few tenths of a degree from the goal set out by the 2015 Paris Agreement on the climate change of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit since pre-industrial times. Though a panel of the United Nations scientists said in March that there was still time to prevent the worst harm from climate change, the scientists said that the world would need to quickly cut two-thirds of the carbon emissions by 2035 to avoid weather that is even more extreme. Peter Slowick, a senior EV researcher with the nonprofit International Council on Clean Transportation, has calculated that to cut emissions through the reach or enough to reach the Paris Agreement goals, the proportion of new electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles sold would have to reach 67% by 2030. The EPA has projected 60% by then. Quote, the EPA proposal is really great start for putting us on a Paris-compatible path, says Slowick, whose group provides research and analysis to environmental regulators. Oh, but no, it is not enough to comply with the Paris Accord. Of course, you see all these photos that I mentioned earlier. The council has calculated that carbon dioxide pollution from passenger vehicles would have to drop 57 grams per mile by 2030 to reach the Paris goals. The EPA's preferred regulation could cut those emissions to 102 grams per mile by 2030 and 82 by 2032. Here we have a video which you'll be able to watch once I provide a link to this website, okay? Now, in addition, Slowick and caution carbon emissions from new gasoline would have to drop 3.5% each year from 2027 to 2032. EPA's preferred regulation doesn't set reductions for gas vehicles. Fuel economy standards recently proposed by National Highway Traffic Safety Administration could. Now, as far as I know, it's been ongoing since the 80s to cut back these carbon emissions, I believe. So I don't think that that's been doing poorly. It's just that we have organizations that don't like what it is. So, well, we'll see what happens in the future. What does the EPA say? The EPA contends its proposal will significantly reduce pollution. It estimates that passenger vehicle carbon dioxide emissions would fall 4.7% by 2055, when this agency expects more gas-powered vehicles to be gone. As the biggest source of pollution in the United States, transportation generates roughly 29% of heat-trapping greenhouse gas emissions, according to the EPA. Passenger vehicles are by far the worst transportation polluters, skewing 58% of the sector's greenhouse gas pollution. I can tell you that more and more public transport is what do they call it, biodiesel, and some of it is actually battery powered. So biodiesel, I remember in the late 90s and early 2000s was the solution. And they've done a lot. There's more and more public transport that's based upon, like the buses are based upon that. So, in terms of that, I don't think they have much to complain about from what I've seen. But of course, I haven't seen everything. So, anyway, I haven't taken the public bus for a while. So, in the U.S., I was actually overseas for a few years. So, I do know in China that they were using was it battery powered? I think it was battery powered buses. Remember right? Using sales projections from the EPA industry analysts from 2022 through model year 2032, the AP calculated that Americans will likely buy roughly 60 million EVs, with 284 million passenger vehicles on the U.S. roads today. At a pace only about 22% of them would be electric in 9 years. 2 million are recently, 2 million are already in use, and vehicles now stay on the road for an average of 12.5 years. So you just do the math. Now, Dave Cook, a senior vehicle analyst for the Union of Concerned Scientists, even with slow vehicle turnover, studies show that EPA's proposal would be an important step toward a zero carbon transportation system by 2050. In addition, power plants that fuel EVs, he noted, will be converted to renewable energy such as wind and solar. Quote, we know that EVs provide a compounding effect as we dramatically cut, referring to electric power grid emissions, Cook said. His group is among those pushing the EPA for more stringent standards than the agency is pursuing. The EPA will consider such comments before adopting a final regulation in March 2024. The auto industry says the limits can't be met. Alliance for Automotive Innovation, a trade group that represents companies such as General Motors, Ford, and Toyota, that make most vehicles sold in the United States, argues the EPA standards are, quote, neither reasonable nor achievable in the time frame covered. The Alliance says the agency is understanding the cost and difficulty in making EV batteries, including short supplies of critical minerals that are used in laptops, cell phones, and other items. Sizable gaps in charging network for long distance travel and for people living in apartments pose another obstacle. Okay, so it's a lot of this stuff is theory, but you have to look at what actually happens in practice. Now, if things change, they change in terms of innovation, but that's what it is. Now, the other thing about charging vehicles, and I forgot to mention this, but this is as a matter of fact, when you charge the electric vehicle, you do cause some pollution. So you can't really avoid polluting. It's only a question of how much. Technically, the only way to be what's called, and I know they didn't mention this in the article, but eventually, as I've heard before, is zero carbon emissions is actually technically impossible because everything's gonna pollute, not only from your personal, everyday things, from biological functions, giving off gas, but also for making things and also for charging, even if it's an EV vehicle. So even if everything was carbon neutral, doesn't pollute at all, what's going to happen is still making it is still going to cause pollution. So basically, the only way to be carbon neutral is basically if nobody made anything and nobody did anything. And then, of course, if there's no human beings, then you can't pollute. It's some craziness because I don't think I'm off by saying that. Anyway, as a matter of fact, EV vehicle. My point is the EV vehicle was basically they charge are actually causing pollution. That's something that's not really talked about much. But that's the fact. Now, though automakers continue to downsize engines and produce more efficient transmissions, the Alliance says they need to use their limited resources more on producing EVs than on developing more more efficient technologies such as gas-powered engines. Are electric vehicles really cleaner? Studies by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology show that shifting to electric vehicles delivers 30 to 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over combustion vehicles depending on how electricity is derived. See that? Depending on how electricity is derived. You have to get the electricity from somewhere. Where are you going to get it from? Nuclear power? Okay, then um, there's still some sort of byproduct. There's a second problem. All the nuclear waste, where are you going to put it? You know what they do with it? They put it in these barrels. They dig it under. They put it in deep underground storage. The thing is, you need storage for all that, and it costs extra to store that. And there's more of a risk with nuclear power. So the thing is, there's always going to be some drawback, and there's always going to be some risk. Now, Jessica Transick, if I pronounce it Transick, MIT professor of energy systems, says electric vehicles are cleaner over their lifetimes, even after taking into account pollution caused by the mining of minerals for batteries. The university has a website that lists auto emissions. Transick believes that once EV sales accelerate, more people will want them, and the percentages could actually exceed EPA predictions. Sales of EVs, she knows, are growing far faster than in many other countries. She said, you often see exponential growth. She said, I did hear about, I gotta get the article at some point. There's a Honda or Toyota that goes 900 miles on a single charge. The only question is, how long does it take to charge? The other thing is, you need to have proper horsepower, you need to have proper steering, and other things as well. So you need to look at the whole picture. You don't just look at one consideration. You look at all the considerations. You know what I mean? With that said, let's continue. Russian and Chinese ships. Okay, excuse me. Before I actually go into the article, I would like to mention, especially because this is a different publisher, that the purpose of this article is for review, informational, and educational purposes. Okay, it is to inform people about what's in the news, review the news itself, and make people educated about what's happening. It's not to take the credit for the intellectual property, in which case it's the article. Full credit of the intellectual property, in which case the article goes to ABC News, the publisher. Okay? I want to make that point clear for disclaimer purposes. Now, let's start with the article, starting with the headline. Russian and Chinese ships patrolled near Alaska but were not a threat, U.S. officials. Here's a video you can watch in its entirety. Looks like 10 minutes. You'll be able to watch that once I give you the link to the article, which I'll give you after I upload this video, after I finish this review. By the way, I do watch these videos too because I want to fully understand what's being said. Now, Russian and Chinese naval formation patrolled, quote, near Alaska, unquote, last week, but, quote, was not considered a threat, unquote, U.S. Northern Command said Sunday. Quote, air and maritime assets under our commands conducted operations to ensure the defense of the United States and Canada, a Northcom statement to NBC said, adding that, quote, the patrol remained in international waters and was not considered a threat. I hope so. What I've been seeing, and I'm just only speaking from my opinion and from my point of view, is it seems like they're probing to see how far they can push the envelope. I hope I'm wrong about that, but that's the way it seems to me. You can come up with your own conclusions based upon what you've heard, what you've seen, and what you've researched, and also from whatever this article is going to tell you, which is the same thing here. U.S. officials told ABC News that the Pentagon had been tracking and expecting this patrol for several weeks, since well before the exercise began. 4 U.S. destroyers and P-8 aircraft were also sent to the shadow the patrol. And you can see from the picture here that a warship and helicopter from the Russian Navy are pictured after a joint naval exercise. It's a Joint Sea 2022 in the East China Sea on December 27, 2022. This is the first I've heard about it, or maybe I forgot about it and they mentioned it. This is what it is. Now, Russia has not publicly commented through a spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington told the journal in a statement, quote, according to the annual cooperation plan between the Chinese and Russian militaries, naval vessels in two countries have recently conducted joint maritime patrols in relevant waters in the western and northern Pacific Ocean. Quote, this action is targeted at it's not targeted at any third party and has nothing to do with the current international and regional situation, the spokesman said. The journal reported that the formation involved 11 Chinese and Russian ships. The number was echoed by U.S. lawmakers. The move represents an apparent show of force by China and Russia. The two countries have increased their ties amid tensions with the U.S. over Taiwan and Ukraine, respectively. Alaska Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan, both Republicans, spoke out against the exercise in statements while reiterating their call for more military funding for the state. We have a picture here, as I pull it up here. A military warship in the armed forces of the Russian Federation arrived in St. Petersburg and moored on the Neva River to participate in the main naval parade of the Russian Navy. That's July 29, 2023. Said, this is a stark reminder of Alaska's proximity to both China and Russia, as well as the essential role our state plays in our national defense and territorial sovereignty, Murkowski said in a part. We have entered a new era of authoritarian aggression led by dictators in Beijing and Moscow, Sullivan said. Well, in recognition of this reality and our state's unrivaled strategic location for years, I've been pressing the Navy and each successive administration to commit to a greater naval, Coast Guard, and Marine Corps presence in Alaska, more Arctic capable vessels, and more infrastructure. So that's basically the article here. I'd like you to weigh in if you'd like. What do you think of Russian and Chinese ships patrolled near Alaska but were not a threat, according to U.S. officials? Feel free to let me know in the comments your opinion and why. Just keep in mind that the rules are that there's no threatening, no derogatory language, and our purpose is for constructive dialogue and people expressing their opinions in non-threatening and civilized ways. The main thing is not just what your opinion is, but why do you think what you think. Now, I'll do it for now for the daily articles for today. Tomorrow I will have a new set of articles. I'm usually aiming anywhere from 2 to 4 articles a day. Sometimes if I only find one newsworthy article, which is very rare, it'll only be one. Anyway, that's what I'm aiming for. So I'd like to thank you for watching the article, because I'm sure that it's good to be informed about such things, especially myself when I saw it. Wow, I really need to talk about that. So, please click like, so that way this video will be pushed to the algorithm and more people will be able to see it, be educated and informed about it, and be able to hear my review. As I said before, the purpose of this was for review, information, and education purposes only. Meaning it's for me to give my opinion about it, and to give people information that's just objectively and mean as in what it says in the article, and to educate people on what's happening in the world. Okay? The full credit for the intellectual property goes to the respective publishers, as in News Network or whatever the whatever it is. Now, um, so if you haven't already, please click subscribe. That way you'll be able to access all my videos. As I do have other videos besides these daily review articles. Okay, my daily reviews, as in I do it about 5 days a week. So, and then if you haven't already, also please click the bell button. That way you'll be notified of all of my future videos. I'd like to again thank you for watching the video. I wish that you have a great day. Take care, and I'll